Welcome back to the Happy Hour. There is breaking news involving Pablo Sandoval. We are working on that. We'll bring you Alex Pavlovich coming up. But in the meantime, we've got our favorite lawyer in the house, Steve Moskowitz, to talk a little sports and the law. And we're just going to start right in your wheelhouse, taxes. Because we know Khalil Mack is holding out for a big contract. We also know in 2 years, the Raiders are going to move to Vegas, where there's no state income tax currently, in California, where they have the highest. John Gruden backloaded his contract, 10 years, $100 million. A lot of it's going to come down the road. So Khalil Mack may be thinking the same thing, but how does that complicate a contract negotiation for him and the Raiders?
Well, first of all, it's great because instead of paying 13.3%, he pays 0, except for the other states when he goes there to play. But what you also have to watch out for, something that all financial people watch out for, is the time value of money. So suppose, for example, the team said, you know what, we're going to do you a favor. We're going to put off paying you for 100 years. That would be a great savings to the team. And what happens with him is the basic decision he'd have to make as a financial person is, if he got the money earlier while he was in California, could he take what he had left, invest it, and get more than 13.3? If the answer is yes, he'd want the money now. If he didn't think he could make an investment more than that, then by all means, wait. But again, you watch out for the time value of money. That's how banks make all their money, by lending and saying it's the time value of money.
It's interesting that you don't see more players just generally not want to go to teams based on the tax implications, because, you know, you've seen it before, but, you know, as you mentioned, and I think a lot of people don't know, that depending on what stadium and what state you play in, that's the way you're taxed. So in this situation, he probably wants to get a lot of it in bonus, because in the signing bonus, that's just going to be taxed on wherever the team is located, most likely, right?
The big thing is where he gets it and when he gets it. So, for example, if I were he and I was going to get that, assuming we factor out the time value of money, because that's real important, they say just wait till I move over to Nevada and then get paid there. But the important thing is that not only is it paid there, he's got to live in another jurisdiction. So if he lives in California, it doesn't matter if he only played in Nevada. He'd get taxed. So you have to go and make sure you're a resident of a state, and there's 9 of them where there's no state income taxes. Nevada's one of them.
But isn't this a relatively simple negotiation about when you'd get your bonus and how to structure it? I mean, the real problem here is not how to figure out the taxes. You can do that.
13.3%, that's easy.
Well, yeah, but I mean, the point is when you would get your money. I mean, the problem here is that they can't decide on how much money to give him in any form.
The first thing is always how much, and then time value of money, when do you get it. And also, you don't, all of us here are way too young to remember Larry Zonka and the other football league. But remember, he did one of those contracts where he said, I'm going to save a lot of taxes, defer it. Then the league folded and he never got paid. So I don't think it's going to happen with the Raiders, but you always have to watch out. What if something happened and they just couldn't pay it? That's one of the chances you take.
No, but I mean, somebody would pay it because the Raiders aren't going to fold. I mean, they might be assumed by another owner, but...
Sure, but that's always a consideration, what would happen. But again, it's, if you got the money now, minus the 13.3, how much could you invest that would make more or less? That is the crucial determination when you're doing this. Not just, well, I'll push it off and save the money, because if he gets the money 3 years from now, $1, and all the banks do this, $1 3 years from now is not as valuable as $1 today, because $1 today you could invest, and 3 years from now you'd have more than $1.
Good point.
Basic banking.
Basic banking. A big story, obviously, in sports right now involving Urban Meyer of Ohio State. He stepped away while the university is investigating. Brett McMurphy is the one who broke this story on his own Facebook page. But he has texts and photos provided by Courtney Smith, the ex-wife of Zach Smith, in terms of domestic violence, assault, harassment, you name it. And those texts show that Urban Meyer had knowledge of what was happening while Zach Smith was his receivers coach at Ohio State. He's since been fired. How much does something like a text message and a photo and a chain between wives, because a lot of these texts were between Urban Meyer's wife and Courtney Smith, that show that he had some level of knowledge that he previously had denied?
Now, of course, as a decent human being, I abhor domestic violence. I think any decent person would. But as defense attorney, Those texts are an allegation, and the problem is the police were called 8 times. There's an investigation. We don't have arrests. We don't have charges. We have an allegation. And what we have to watch out for is these guys can be targets too, because someone can say, you did something horrible to me at home, and then the civil suit comes and you say, I want lots of money from you. And again, what we have here is allegations. The fact that the wives exchanged texts, that doesn't mean that it ever happened. And in today's atmosphere, we have to remember the entire American justice system is based on presenting evidence, an opportunity to be heard. That's basic due process. And here we have a lot of these cases where someone makes an allegation and people jump and say, oh, you should be banned forever, drawn and quartered, shot, and your ashes burned. So the bottom line is we only have allegations here. And as a defense attorney, what I want to say is that's horrible. And anybody that had a father, brother, son, who had those allegations made against them would want to have him go in and present his case. Right now, the only thing we have is allegations. And again, there's no evidence. There's no evidence. That's what I have a terrible problem with as an attorney.
So if let's say there is some evidence and it presents itself and they find that Urban Meyer really did know about this. And
that's a different story.
If that were to be the case, is it just up to the employer of what they want to do, or is there legal ramifications because he was overseeing this guy and had knowledge of it?
Once again, we're so much getting into the court of public opinion because there's no law that requires an employer to punish an employee. That's what the government's for. So if you do an axe murder and you're released from prison, the employer says, well, I'm going to punish you some more. That's the government's job, to punish somebody if they think they're guilty. So again, that could be a team policy. If the team said, look, anybody convicted of something is going to be fired immediately, that's fine. But again, what's the policy? It's not a law. The law does not require, and just think about it, then you'd have vigilante justice because you have individuals saying, I'm going to punish you. And don't forget, it wasn't that long ago that people killed other people on an allegation.
But I don't think that Meyer's in danger of getting fired for anything, at least as much as I've read, except perhaps lying to his employer. Would there be specific language that would require him to be truthful to them? Or is that too falling into public opinion?
First of all, as an employer, I hate to say this, but at the moment, there's no law against lying to your employer about a lot of things. However, they probably have a morals clause in there where they'd get them on that. So that could be the problem. But again, the whole thing here is that the pendulum has swung from the old days where, you know, somebody could beat somebody else and the police said, well, that's your problem, why are you bothering us, to now an allegation against somebody maybe from years ago. And remember, this is divorce situations, a lot of acrimony here. Was the truth being told? Ask any judge that, you know, a lot of people come in and say things that aren't true, and that's what bothers me so much. There's been an allegation. No independent agency has said, hey, you've done something wrong, and charged them. That is a big deal, guys.
Yeah, which is why we'll probably see future litigation, just like Rick Pitino suing Louisville for firing him. Urban Meyer, if he gets fired, the same could be done. In another story involving J.R. Smith of the Cleveland Cavaliers, and this is interesting to me because cell phones now, everybody thinks that they have a right to take a picture of people on the streets, even like in a restaurant. You know, you're in a public place, right? But
I'm going to take a picture of Ray right now.
Even bathrooms and things like that. So he basically, in New York, a fan asked to take a photo. He said no. The guy did it anyways, and he grabbed the phone and he threw it into a construction zone. The fan is now he filed a police report, basically. So when you're on a public sidewalk, do you have any sort of rights to say, no, you can't just, because I'm on a public sidewalk, take pictures of me?
It depends on the jurisdiction. New York's law is the opposite of ours. In New York, you don't have that right. So if I go up to a celebrity and I say, oh, look at this. You know, I always want to take a picture. And I go, that's okay. In California, the law is the opposite. It's not okay. But in either jurisdiction, the victim here doesn't have the right to basically commit an assault. The minute you rip something out of somebody's hands, legally it's the same as if you punch them. You've assaulted him. That's where the problem, not to mention the fact that the property has been destroyed, and I'm sure the owner of the cell phone is going to say that he has horrible emotional distress and he can't sleep anymore and he has nightmares and all these terrible things, but that would all be made by a payment of lots and lots of money. So again, violence is never the legal answer, but it depends an awful lot on the jurisdiction. New York lets you do it. California isn't. Which, well, with all the movie stars here like you guys,
we're famous, so we don't want people just taking pictures of us on the street.
Quickly. So, but the paparazzi's famous in L.A., so they legally not allowed to do what they do and take pictures of people.
And just like so many other things, there's so many laws that are broken all the time. They just do it, and they get paid for it.
Can Smith go, if Smith didn't destroy the phone and just was mad that he had his picture taken after he said, and he was in California, say, could he actually legally go after the guy?
Yeah, so what he would do is he'd ask for a restraining order, and he said, Judge, don't let him use it, take it away from him, don't let him sell it, and if he went ahead and quick sold it, he'd say, okay, then I get all those proceeds. So in California, there's some things, but again, all laws ban violence. You're never, it's called self-help, you're never allowed to go and say, well, okay, I'll just punch you out myself and settle this.
Right, keep your hands to yourself, Grant.
And don't forget it.
Steve Moskowitz, we appreciate
Always
your time
a pleasure.
here on the Happy Hour. Coming up next, Alex Pavlovich will join us on the phone as we discuss what's going on with Pablo Sandoval. His season is over. Why is that? The bad hammy, apparently a lot worse. That's next on the Happy Hour.